Picture this, a line of eager citizens clutching their voter registration cards, ready to cast their ballots in a beacon of democracy. Now, envision a starkly different scene. Rows of steel bars, confining individuals stripped of their freedom, their voices seemingly silenced. And finally, imagine a sea of red hats, a chorus of Make America Great Again, a movement led by a figure who has both captivated and repulsed the nation. These contrasting images, the ballot box, the prison cell, the Trump rally, might seem worlds apart, but they are intricately connected, highlighting a fundamental tension in the American experiment. The promise of equal rights versus the reality of mass incarceration and the disenfranchisement of millions. This is a story about voting rights, about the millions of Americans who have lost that fundamental right due to felony convictions. It's about the surprising appeal of Donald Trump to some within this disenfranchised population, and it's about the broader implications for our democracy, for justice, and for what it truly means to be a citizen in the United States. The United States, a nation that prides itself on democratic ideals, stands out for a rather undemocratic practice, denying the right to vote to millions of its citizens due to felony convictions. This isn't a uniform policy, mind you. Instead, it's a dizzying patchwork of state laws, each with its own set of rules, restrictions, and exceptions. Let's break it down. In Maine and Vermont, felons never lose their right to vote, even while incarcerated. On the other end of the spectrum, we have states like Florida, Kentucky, and Virginia, which impose lifetime voting bans on individuals with felony convictions, a practice that disenfranchises millions. The numbers are staggering. According to the Sentencing Project, an estimated 5.2 million Americans were ineligible to vote in the 2020 election due to felony disenfranchisement laws. That's larger than the population of several states combined. Think about the potential impact on elections, on representation, on the very fabric of our democracy. The variation in state laws creates a confusing and often unjust system. For example, a person convicted of a nonviolent drug offense in one state might permanently lose their right to vote, while someone convicted of a violent crime in a neighboring state might regain their voting rights after completing their sentence. This inconsistency raises serious questions about fairness, equity, and the very purpose of disenfranchisement. Now, let's step inside the walls of America's prisons, where a surprising political landscape unfolds. The Marshall Project, a non-profit news organization focused on criminal justice, conducted a groundbreaking survey of incarcerated individuals, offering a rare glimpse into their political views. The findings were eye-opening, to say the least. While support for Democratic candidates was generally higher, a significant portion of those surveyed expressed support for Donald Trump. This might seem counterintuitive at first. Why would individuals incarcerated under a system that many argue disproportionately targets minorities and the poor support a figure like Trump? The reasons are complex and varied. Some inmates connected with Trump's image as a successful businessman, someone who defied the odds and achieved wealth and power. Others appreciated his tough-on-crime rhetoric, even if it meant harsher sentencing guidelines. And some simply felt a sense of disillusionment with the political establishment, a sentiment that Trump skillfully tapped into. The Marshall Project's survey shattered assumptions and revealed a nuanced picture of political ideologies within the incarcerated population. It also underscored the importance of engaging with this often overlooked segment of society, understanding their concerns, and addressing the systemic issues that contribute to their disenfranchisement. Can a convicted felon run for President of the United States? The Constitution is surprisingly quiet on this issue. It only requires a candidate to be a natural-born citizen, at least 35 years old, and a resident for 14 years. No mention of criminal history. This has led to debate and speculation. Some argue voters should decide a candidate's fitness. Others believe the framers never envisioned this scenario. It raises questions about redemption and leadership. The support for Donald Trump among some incarcerated individuals presents a perplexing paradox. Here's a man who built his wealth on real estate, casinos, and a reality TV persona, yet resonated with a segment of the population most impacted by mass incarceration. How do we make sense of this seemingly contradictory phenomenon? Trump tapped into a deep-seated sense of frustration among working-class Americans, regardless of their background or criminal history. He promised to drain the swamp, bring back jobs, and make America great again. For some incarcerated individuals, Trump's message of economic populism and his outsider status resonated. They saw him as a disruptor, a rule breaker who challenged the status quo. However, many were troubled by his rhetoric on immigration, race relations, and criminal justice reform. The Marshall Project survey highlighted the diversity of political views within the incarcerated population. The Trump phenomenon underscores the need to engage with the lived experiences and perspectives of all Americans, including those marginalized and disenfranchised. The disenfranchisement of millions of Americans due to felony convictions is not just a statistical anomaly, it's a moral stain on our democracy. It undermines the very principles of equality, representation, and civic participation that are supposed to define our nation. When we deny individuals the right to vote, we send a powerful message that they are not full members of society, that their voices don't matter, that they are unworthy of participating in the democratic process. This can lead to a sense of alienation, cynicism, and distrust in the government. Moreover, disenfranchisement disproportionately impacts communities of color, perpetuating a vicious cycle of marginalization and disengagement. According to the Sentencing Project, 1 in 16 black adults is disenfranchised, a rate 3.7 times greater than that of non-black adults. This racial disparity and disenfranchisement undermines the legitimacy of our elections and erodes trust in our justice system. The high cost of disenfranchisement extends beyond the individuals directly impacted. It weakens our democracy by silencing voices, limiting political participation, and undermining the fundamental principle of one person, one vote. Section 7. Second Chances and Civic Engagement, Arguments for Restoring Voting Rights. The debate over felon voting rights often centers around two competing narratives: punishment versus rehabilitation. Those who advocate for restoring voting rights to individuals with felony convictions argue that it's not only a matter of fairness, but also a crucial step towards reintegration and civic engagement. They contend that once individuals have served their time, they should be welcomed back into society as full citizens, with all the rights and responsibilities that come with it. Denying them the right to vote, they argue, creates a permanent underclass and undermines their ability to successfully reintegrate into society. Proponents of restoring voting rights point to the rehabilitative power of civic participation. When individuals are given a stake in their communities, when they have a voice in the political process, they are more likely to become law-abiding citizens and contribute positively to society. Furthermore, they argue that disenfranchisement laws are often rooted in outdated and discriminatory practices that disproportionately target communities of color. Restoring voting rights to individuals with felony convictions, they believe, is an essential step towards achieving racial justice and dismantling systemic inequalities in the criminal justice system. Section 8. Opponents speak out, safeguarding elections and upholding the rule of law. While the movement to restore voting rights to individuals with felony convictions has gained momentum in recent years, it's essential to acknowledge the perspectives of those who oppose such measures. Their arguments often center around concerns about safeguarding the integrity of elections and upholding the rule of law. Opponents of felon voting rights argue that individuals who have committed serious crimes have forfeited their right to participate in the democratic process. They contend that voting is a privilege, not an inherent right, and that it should be reserved for those who have demonstrated respect for the law and their fellow citizens. They also express concerns about the potential for voter fraud and manipulation if individuals with felony convictions are allowed to vote. They argue that such individuals might be more susceptible to coercion or intimidation, and that their participation in elections could undermine public trust in the electoral process. Furthermore, opponents of restoring voting rights often emphasize the importance of consequences for criminal actions. They believe that disenfranchisement serves as a deterrent to crime and reinforces the principle that actions have consequences. Section 9. Beyond the Ballot Box, Reintegration, Redemption, and a More Just Society. The debate over felon voting rights extends far beyond the ballot box. It's a conversation about redemption, about second chances, and about what it truly means to be a member of society. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our criminal justice system, our history of racial discrimination, and our commitment to equality and justice for all. Denying individuals the right to vote based on past convictions perpetuates a cycle of marginalization and exclusion. It creates a permanent underclass of citizens who are denied a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. This not only undermines their individual rights but also weakens our democracy as a whole. On the other hand, restoring voting rights to individuals with felony convictions sends a powerful message of hope and redemption. It acknowledges that people can change, that they can learn from their mistakes, and that they deserve a second chance to participate fully in society. Ultimately, the question of whether or not to restore voting rights to individuals with felony convictions is a question about the kind of society we want to live in. Do we believe in punishment without redemption, or do we strive to create a more just and inclusive society that values second chances and recognizes the inherent dignity of all its members? Section 10. Your voice, your vote, a call to action for a more inclusive democracy. The issue of felon voting rights is a matter of fundamental fairness and the health of our democracy. It's about real people, their lives and their right to participate in decisions that shape their futures. Engage in this critical conversation and advocate for policies that promote justice and inclusivity. Learn about the laws in your state. Do they allow individuals with felony convictions to vote? Support organizations working to restore voting rights. Contact your elected officials and urge them to support voting rights for all citizens. The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy. By working together, we can create a more just and inclusive society for all. Remember, your voice matters and your vote counts.